Your brain is a prediction machine. Your brain isn't designed to simply react to reality. Its real job is predicting the future, every second. Your brain is constantly asking questions. What happens if I say this? What if something goes wrong? What if something amazing happens? Instead of waiting to find out, your brain runs tiny simulations. Scientists sometimes compare this to having a movie studio inside your head. Your mind creates thousands of possible futures every single day. Most of these simulations happen so quickly that you never notice them. But for some people, those simulations become entire movies. The conversation starts, then another, 30 minutes later, you're still inside a world that never happened. Ironically, this ability helped our ancestors survive. Imagining danger before it happened often meant staying alive. Today, the same survival system imagines embarrassing moments, future arguments, or impossible success stories instead. Your imagination isn't broken, it's simply doing its job, sometimes a little too enthusiastically. The dopamine trap. So why is it so hard to stop? Because imaginary worlds often feel rewarding. Every exciting fantasy, every perfect conversation, every heroic version of yourself can activate your brain's reward system. Your brain releases dopamine whenever it anticipates something pleasurable. The fascinating part? Sometimes your brain responds almost as strongly to imagined rewards as real ones. Imagine becoming rich, winning an award, finding your dream partner, getting revenge, receiving applause. For a few seconds, your brain experiences a small emotional reward. That's why many people keep returning to these fantasies, not because they're lazy, but because their brain has learned thinking about this feels good. Eventually, imagining becomes a habit. Whenever life becomes stressful, your brain knows exactly where to escape. When daydreaming becomes an escape. Everyone daydreams. Research suggests people spend a surprisingly large portion of their waking lives thinking about something other than what's happening right now. Normally, this is harmless. In fact, daydreaming boosts creativity. It helps solve problems. It allows people to rehearse difficult conversations. But sometimes, it becomes something else. Instead of visiting imaginary worlds, people begin living inside them. Psychologists call an extreme version of this maladaptive daydreaming. Although it isn't officially recognized as a separate mental disorder, researchers have described it as immersive fantasy that begins interfering with everyday life. Some people spend hours pacing, listening to music, acting out imaginary conversations, creating entire fictional universes. Meanwhile, real life slowly gets ignored. Homework, relationships, work, sleep, everything becomes secondary. Not because fantasy is more important, but because reality feels less rewarding. Your brain loves unfinished conversations. Ever replay an awkward conversation? For years. There's a reason. Your brain dislikes unfinished situations. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect. Unfinished tasks stay active in your memory longer than completed ones. That's why after an argument, your brain keeps inventing better responses. I should have said that. I should have done this. If only. Your brain keeps searching for closure. Unfortunately, imaginary closure rarely satisfies it, so the loop continues, again, and again, and again. Social anxiety makes it worse. People who fear judgment often imagine conversations before they happen. They rehearse, predict reactions, prepare every possible answer. From the outside, it looks like overthinking. Inside the brain, it's an attempt to avoid embarrassment. Ironically, the more possibilities your brain creates, the more anxious you become. Instead of reducing fear, your imagination multiplies it. One awkward meeting becomes 50 possible disasters, and none of them are real. The perfect life inside your head. Social media makes this even stronger. Every perfect vacation, perfect body, perfect relationship, perfect career. Your brain starts imagining a version of yourself that seems happier than reality. Soon, real life feels disappointing, not because it's terrible, but because it can't compete with a fantasy where everything always goes perfectly. The imaginary version never fails, never gets rejected, never feels awkward, Real people do. How to break the loop. The goal isn't to stop imagining. Imagination is one of humanity's greatest strengths. The key is noticing when imagination replaces action. Ask yourself, am I preparing or escaping? If imagining motivates you to act, it's helpful. If imagining becomes the only thing you do, it's becoming a trap. Simple habits can help. Notice when you've drifted into fantasy. Bring your attention back to your surroundings. Write down recurring imagined scenarios to identify patterns. Limit triggers, such as music or routines that always pull you into long fantasies. Turn one imagined goal into a real, concrete action. Reality may never be as perfect as fantasy, but unlike fantasy, reality can actually change your life. Why your brain repeats the same stories. Have you ever noticed that you don't imagine completely random scenarios? Instead, your brain often replays the same ones, the same argument, the same romantic encounter, the same moment where everyone finally understands you, or the same disaster you've been afraid of for years. This happens because your brain is drawn to emotionally important memories and goals. The stronger the emotion, the more likely your mind is to revisit it. Think of your brain like a streaming service. Every time you watch a particular imaginary scenario, the algorithm assumes you enjoyed it, so it recommends that exact story again and again. Over time, those mental movies become easier to access than ever. You don't even choose to start imagining. A song reminds you of someone. A familiar place triggers a memory. One sentence from a stranger sparks an entire fictional conversation. Before you realize it, 10 minutes have disappeared, sometimes even an hour. This repetition creates a mental habit, not because the scenarios are useful, but because they're familiar. And the human brain loves familiarity, even when it's imagining something that never happened. The difference between creativity and escapism. Some of the greatest artists, writers, inventors, and filmmakers spent countless hours inside their imagination. Without imagination, there would be no novels, no movies, no scientific breakthroughs, no revolutionary inventions. So where's the line? The difference isn't how much you imagine, it's what happens afterward. Creative imagination usually produces something: a painting, a story, a business idea, a solution to a difficult problem. Escapist imagination, on the other hand, ends where it began, inside your head. Nothing changes in the real world. Imagine two people dreaming about becoming musicians. One imagines performing every night, but never practices. The other imagines success, then picks up a guitar. Both started with the same fantasy. Only one transformed imagination into reality. Your imagination is like fuel. It can power your future, or it can burn endlessly without moving you forward. The choice isn't whether to imagine. It's whether imagination becomes your starting point or your destination. Why letting go feels so difficult? If imaginary scenarios aren't real, why can they feel so emotional? Because your brain doesn't always separate imagination from experience as clearly as you'd expect. When you picture an embarrassing moment, your heart may race. When you imagine falling in love, you may genuinely smile. When you replay an argument, your body can become tense all over again. That's because many of the same brain regions involved in real experiences also become active when vividly imagining them. Your body reacts, even when nothing is happening. This is why letting go can feel surprisingly difficult. You're not just abandoning a thought. You're walking away from an emotional experience. The good news is, once you recognize the pattern, you regain control. Instead of automatically following every imaginary story, you can simply notice it, let it pass, and gently return your attention to the present. Your imagination will always be there. It doesn't need to disappear. It simply needs to work for you, instead of controlling you. The next time you catch yourself replaying a conversation that never happened, or living inside a perfect future that doesn't exist, remember this: your imagination is meant to inspire your life, not replace it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.